The transfer window is open and the first person through the door is Jack Taylor. Here is our reaction. So here we go, Joe, into the window. Jack Taylor in. Just give me we'll go into detail, just give me your first sort of feelings on the deal.
Well, it's one that's been ongoing for a long time, isn't it? I think even on Twitter yesterday, there was all the talk in January, but on Twitter yesterday, Darren McCann mentioned that he'd been down at Portman Road for a tour of the stadium even in January. So we obviously got very close to getting him over the line at that point. And it always felt like one we were going to go back in for. I know some people were talking about, oh, well, now we're in the Championship, are we going to be looking at different players? But
I was a bit like that. I'll hold my hands up.
Yeah, but I think when you go sort of up to £2 million for someone in January, it's with a view to the next couple of years. And Mark Ashton has previously spoken about how they're recruiting the same players whether they're in the Championship or League One, and I think he's just one that fits into that. There's sort of a reliable poster on TWTD. He says that McKenna and Taylor have been talking all through the summer. It seemed like one that was just always going to happen, and finally he gets his man. And like George Hurst, these long pursuits have generally turned out well for us.
Is this one as long as the Hurst one? Because we started hearing about Jack Taylor last summer, didn't we? It feels like a similar sort of length of time, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah, and it's one that every time we've played Peterborough, you've noticed McKenna, Rene Gilmartin, who I think worked with Taylor in the Irish under-21 setup, and it's a key part of the management team at Portman Road. They spend a lot of time speaking to him, and so he's just a player that he obviously has the attributes that they want. And you look, I say, unfortunately, no one's put a Y Scout video together of his last 2 years. But when you look back at the one that's doing the rounds, I think it's 18-19 season, showing his sort of first half season at Peterborough and his time at Barnet, you can see the type of player he is. And we've obviously seen it against us in the League One playoffs over the last few weeks. And it's just that type of player that they obviously know exactly what they want profile-wise, and he fits that perfectly.
I'll let you describe what that is in just a second, Joe. Let's just get his dashboard up there. So 25 years old, so nice, good age there. You can see, well, if you look on the right, if you're watching on YouTube, apologies if you're listening on the podcast, just the thing that jumped off the page before we hit record, Joe, that surprised me, 250 games already at 25, which is...
He was only 25 on Friday, wasn't he? So...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just excellent. Last 3 seasons in, obviously he was in the Championship with the Posh, 34 games there. And talking about consistency, last season, 46 games. We love to see that. Usually get that from keepers, maybe the odd centre-back, but not many central midfielders. 15 goal contributions. And there's another 2 in that playoff epic 2-legger with Sheffield Wednesday. So that's the data exclusively, Joe, tells us it's a very experienced for his age central midfielder, capable of certainly output goal-wise. So when you mention profile, what's your sort of take on his profile?
Well, I think one of the key things is the versatility as well, isn't it? That he's played deeper for a lot of his career. So when you look at his goal numbers throughout his career, they don't jump off the page. But it seemed like last season when Darren Ferguson came in January, he freed him up to play a much more advanced role.
Norburn returned at the same time to sit, didn't he? Yeah,
sit deep and push him on. And it shows that he's a player who was probably, well, do we want to talk about Darren McCann tweet about him? Yeah, he talks about how he was their best player. He was a player that drove them on to the playoffs from that January window where they kept hold of him in the second half of the season. He was magnificent, and I think that's a line that you're going to hear all Posh fans saying as well about him. He just stepped up a gear, and I think when you see, I think the Sheffield Wednesday first leg is probably the best example of how he played, and it's just those lung-busting runs, getting ahead of the strikers, getting on the ball, being able to take the ball in tight situations in his own half, being able to have that turn of pace to beat a player, to break a line, both sort of dribbling the ball and passing the ball through the lines as well. He's just a very forward-focused player, and he's got, like I say, a lot of ability. He's got a great strike on him, and like I say, it's just that energy you see that getting up and down the pitch. And I think it's for just looking purely at the Sheffield Wednesday game, the third goal, he's the one breaking head of the strikers, getting into the box, doesn't make the header that time. The fourth time, he's the furthest player forward, gets a great shot on goal. Keeper saves it. He's the one that picks the ball up and has that calmness of mind to stand the ball up to the back post to where Clark Harris is and pick up a great assist. And it's just that, like I say, he's just young, experienced, talented, athletic. It's sort of all the stuff that we look for in players at the moment.
And I think the key thing, Joe, as well, is with the players they've really invested money in, Davis, Broadhead, Clark, and now Taylor. It's all about building up the asset base on the balance sheet, assuming it all goes well and their values all increase. And then come a year's time, hopefully already particularly with Davis, the value would be increasing. It kind of fits into that mold, doesn't he, of an asset that could appreciate with, maybe one or two good championship seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. If we have the season we all want us to have in the Championship next year, as in pushing at that top part of the league, and he's one of the key players in that, which is presumably why he's been signed, then that value of, talking of a fee of just shy of $1.5 million, it seems to be reported.
We're very much in undisclosed, allegedly, and we will come on to Darren McAntony's tweets with all this, aren't we, Joe?
But like I say, if you can prove yourself, you look at someone like George Saville, for example, when he left Millwall to go to Middlesbrough.
$6 million.
Yeah, and I think it might have even been a bit more than that. And he wasn't that much when he went back there, put it that way. But
I remember that season well, Joe. I think they finished 8th.
Yeah, and if you prove you can play at the top end of that league, and you've got these well-off parachute teams who just want some players that can come in and hit the ground running and give them that championship experience, then these are the sort of players that can go from there. They don't all need to be going to the Premier League to make a big profit on them. There's a lot of money being spent by the teams that come down as well.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see that in the coming weeks when the names we always mention when Southampton will need to replace Ward Prowse and Leicester Maddison, and maybe not going to go and get actually been linked with Harry Winks today, so maybe they are going to get a Premier League player, but you never know. Right, so talk to me then, Joe, about how he sort of fits in, because I've been a big proponent of you need to have the capacity to do your two-man midfield, and let's be fair, the post-Valentine's Day streak, we pretty much attacked for most of every game, didn't we? And you could have the two-man midfield of Morsey and Luongo with, sort of ended up 4-2-3-1, didn't it? With, 3 ahead of them. That's not going to be as easy in the Championship for sure, isn't it? There's going to be teams that will low block you with far better quality than defensive-wise and structure and even player for player than you got in League One. And there's going to be teams where we're not going to have the ball, and you can't sit there with a two-man central midfield. Is he kind of a good solution in respects of if you wanted to go straight 4-3-3 and he can join up, that's fine. If you wanted to go, I don't know, against a parachute team with a back three and maybe a front two and a three-man midfield in that respect, is that how you see him being able to do the kind of two roles in midfield?
I think, this is what we were saying earlier about the versatility, that he can play in that deeper role. So he can play alongside a Morsey or a Luongo in that deeper role when we do play a two, because he has got the tenacity to his game, the physicality and the ability to get up and down the pitch to do that. But also, like you say, in those games where we're not going to be dominating the ball and we might need to put a third player in midfield, he has got that engine to get up and down, and almost, because you almost need the same skill set as what you do in the two as you do in the three, but with a little bit more attacking wise to it. But I think he will have that. But that's probably the most interesting area of the team, isn't it? Because we played through the first half of last season with sort of Sam Morsey and Lee Evans in there as a two. Lee Evans generally the one sitting deeper, spraying the ball about, and Morsey the one getting up and down the pitch. But it didn't seem to, whilst it worked well at the start of the season, whenever we came up against a better team with more mobile players in midfield, we did seem to struggle a little bit there. And then in the second half of the season, it's just, it almost seemed more important that you had players who were physically capable of winning their battles and being good on the ball, as opposed to being good physically and excellent on the ball. You sort of needed the off-ball ability seemed to be more important than the on-ball ability in that midfield, as long as your on-ball ability was to a certain standard, which it was with Massimo Luongo and Sam Morsey. So it's a difficult one to see, but I think if you started the season tomorrow, you'd be looking at Sam Morsey and Jack Taylor in there as a 2, I think, because everything works around that otherwise.
I always find, Joe, I'm all for splitting up midfields. And if you check our Telegram exclusive with Matt Holland, he speaks about this far better than I ever could in terms of, one person doing job A and one person doing job B. My favourite midfielders, and we used to get torn apart by Kearney and Johansson and McDonald by Fulham. And I dare remember an East Anglian derby where Norwich did it to us as well, where all of the midfielders could do all of the jobs.
Everything.
Yeah. And that, I suppose, is the excitement. We don't want to get into. I'm very keen on the pod to always avoid everything brilliant, everything amazing. Our SHIT don't stink, etc. So for the people that aren't necessarily into this transfer, I assume the reason why they wouldn't be is it's a target, as you mentioned, that we had in League One, and do you now fish in a different pond? That could be a good thing, but as you point out, could also be a good thing to stick with your targets if they're long-term targets. And B, he's coming from a team in League One. So do you understand that? I've seen some pushback, or is it just familiarity that it's not a new name to people and one we've known for ages? What's your kind of response to we don't want to be, this is a brilliant signing, everything brilliant deal, brilliant. What's your response to the kind of the slight pushback you get on every signing?
I guess sometimes maybe people get bored of targets as well, don't they? When you hear the same name linked for so long, and it was all through the January window we were linked to him, and it has been since the end of the season. There's been an expectation he's just going to sign for us, and maybe, I don't know, you sometimes talk yourself out of signings rather than into them when things.
I think that's what I did, to be fair. Yeah.
And think, well, if we haven't signed him now, why didn't we sign him then? And I think there were good reasons, and I think it was sort of well covered effectively that Peterborough wanted to try and push for promotion last year. And when you look at it, I know they didn't get over the line, but after their first leg win against Sheffield Wednesday, when they're 4-0 up from there, I think everyone concluded that they made the right decision by not cashing in on any assets in January. But it's just, I do think, I don't generally like to just say, well, they're the football people, they know more about it than we do. But I think when you've got someone like Kieran McKenna and his recruitment team, which is now fully up and running, and the guys, like I say, he's got someone like Rene Gilmartin in his.
You're going to mention the recruitment room.
In his, the black box recruitment room, but someone in his management team has worked with Taylor as well, and this is one that we've done our homework on, and I think the management team have probably earned enough trust in their dealings so far that you just got to go with them on this one. And I don't normally like to say that because I think it's it's an easy out to say, oh well, they know what they're doing better than we do. And there are times when you look at it, and for example, and I don't want to criticise him because he hasn't played yet, but Penuche Kamara, you hear about him, and he said, "Oh, when did you first hear about the interest?" And it's like, "Oh, transfer deadline day. I got a call in the morning and I had to get up here and sort it out." And you think, well, yeah, that's very different to tracking a player for months and months, speaking to him, bringing him to the ground in January, speaking to him over the summer. This is as surefire a signing as you're going to make with regards to him doing what we want him to do. It might not be enough. It might not work. We might end up having to go down a different route, but he's been signed with a very specific purpose in mind. And that signing is one that everyone in the club is fully behind, which hopefully speaks volumes.
I should have pushed you 5 minutes ago on, so you're seeing it as Luongo kind of starting on the bench possibly at Sunderland?
I'd say so at the moment. I think, obviously, Luongo was brilliant through the second half of last season. Him and Morsey had a really good partnership. But I know he's had his injury issues in the past, but effectively, we've only given him a 1-year contract. If there was a real belief that he's going to be our long-term starter in there, you'd be looking to have put in a 2 or 3 year contract, wouldn't you? And I think the fact it's 1 year probably suits both of us, that he's going to come in and there's going to be a hell of a competition in there, and no doubt he'll start a lot of games for us next season.
And we can play all 3 of them, Joe.
And you can play all 3 of them, and there are going to be times when you need to, maybe not like in League One when you're playing against a Morecambe, a Forest Green, or an Accrington, when you're 2-0 up in those games, you can just keep your foot on the throat and try and crack your goal difference down. But if you're 2-0 up and you're playing away at Leicester, you're going to want to be doing something to try and shut that game down, aren't you? Because they're going to be
2-0 up away at Leicester. I'll take it, Joe.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. In those games, if you get into a position where you've got a really good lead,
control the game.
You can't just keep going for it because they have the quality to hurt you. Where some of these teams, you know that they don't have the quality to hurt you, and you can just keep going. And they're the times when you've got a player with that experience, you can just come in and help shut games down for you.
Let's talk about Dara McAntony then, who is very Marmite. So I'll give the two views I've heard about his piece to camera. So on the one hand, you get the people that buy every word of it. Oh, great honesty, amazing. How refreshing this is to see an owner doing this. On the other hand, you get the people that say, I don't believe a single word of this. Where are we with this? Because I watched a lot of professional wrestling when I was growing up, and they always said it was best when the guy's half in character and half telling the truth, and you kind of don't quite know where the line is. And when I watched that, Dara McAntony, I'm like, this is like a professional wrestling promo. He's kind of in character, but he's also probably telling the truth. And I don't know where one begins and one ends. Obviously, he's got to get, to use an American politics term, he's got to reach his base, hasn't he? And make them feel like they've got the best deal. And, he's bigged up the player, et cetera, and put all the pressure on us now with the Ivan Toney comparison. I think I'm down the middle on it. What's your take on Dara's monologue?
To be fair, I do quite like Dara, and I do listen to his podcast. But I think if you're a sensible football fan who follows the game as closely as we do and a lot of our listeners do, you know where the line is with him. You know what he's trying to achieve when he's saying stuff. And it's very different when he's talking players up, and like Ronnie Edwards is the one who's spoken up. And it's like, that is because he is a salesman. And like your wrestling analogy, they're salesmen, and they're trying to, whether it be actual money in for a player for Dara, or whether it's getting viewers to watch in the wrestling analogy. But I think there's no real need for him to be as praising as he is of Jack Taylor as a player and his quality now, because he's not selling him anymore. He sold him. If he wanted to go on Twitter and do a 2-minute message saying, brilliant, I'm so pleased for him, he's a great guy, he's got a great deal, he's really deserved it. Peterborough have got a great deal as a club, which is what he's got to say to his fan base, whether it's true or not.
And Joe, to possible players who might want to come and join, you can be the next.
We made him a promise in January, and that promise has now been kept in the summer. So he's got a message, and he's not giving that message to Ipswich fans. He's giving that message to Peterborough fans and people who are interested in Peterborough. And sometimes I think football fans need to remember that, like when a manager's doing a press conference, he's talking to his own fans, not to the football in general. It's just things can go wider now. But there's no need for him to be as praising of he is, of how good he is, how good he can be, how good a season he's had for them, because the deal is done now. And I agree with him. I think he's a player that is going to be a good championship player. Yeah, he's not going to be the best central midfielder outside the Premier League, which Dara said, but he might push up like that. And you see some of the players in the championship, and I think, well, you're top players and top teams, but you don't look like you've got a huge amount about you other than character, physicality, and just being able to do the right things at the right times. And Taylor looks like a player who can do that for us. And I think it's all positive what Dara says. Yeah, there's going to be the talk about the deal. There was.
Yeah, what's your take on that? Because and again, we're not going to pretend we know. I haven't seen the deal, and Stuart Watson and Phil Ham both went 1.5 million, and then Dara's giving it the old wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Oh, yeah, I reckon it was way more than that. Blah blah blah. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I tend to trust our local media, so if they're saying it's just under 1.5, I'd believe them on that. It might even be a bit lower. There might be a part of that which is rolled up in appearances and things like that, which he can then point to as, oh, the fee's bigger, where we can say it's smaller and there's top ups.
Yeah, there's the fee and then there's the deal, isn't there?
I guess we have to talk about the difference in size of clubs and budgets as well, because when he says, oh, there's a big amount of money coming our way if it was to get promoted to the Premier League, and we say it's a small amount, well, that might be, if that's 500,000, for example, that is a big amount of money to Peterborough, isn't it? That's for a size of their budget, that's a big chunk of money to add into their budget. But for us, 500,000 if you get promoted to the Premier League is peanuts, isn't it? You're paying that when you're picking up £100 million on TV money.
Speak to a Leicester or a Saints fan. They're going to say a good deal for one of those England players is 70 million, isn't it? And so it's all relative, isn't it?
So, but yeah, if the fee, I guess you're looking to somewhere around 1.5 or just under for that, 500 grand if you get promoted to the Premier League, and maybe a 10-15% sell-on fee. Well, that's a good deal for them, because if he goes on and does well and Ipswich get promoted and he gets a move later down the line, that deal that starts out at 1.5 million could end up as 5 million to them. And for a player that you've picked up from the non-league, that's a brilliant deal, isn't it? No, it's not the sort of deal that they managed to get for like Ivan Toney or someone of that quality, but strikers cost money, and that is what it's at. And unless, like Jack Taylor, I think Dara said if he played in that, the way he did for the second half of the season under Darren Ferguson, he could have got 20 goals last season. Yeah, there's probably an exaggeration in that. But if you're a midfielder that's getting 15 goals and 5 or 6 assists every season, you get 20 goal contributions, you are going to be worth mega money. So if we find a way of playing him in a role which can see him popping up and scoring a lot of goals, then yeah, he is going to be a player that becomes very valuable to us. And because of that, becomes very valuable to Peterborough further down the line. But if everyone's happy with the deal, I assume we are. He is, or he's putting on that face to his fans, then yeah, brilliant.
So we're talking about these sort of young. I mean, he doesn't quite make the mould of, say, the other three I've mentioned: Davis, Broadhead, and Clark.
Where it's Broadhead, isn't he?
But Joe, I was going to say, in respects of big club academy, that background that they seem to have gone for, he's sort of worked his way through. Taylor, do you see more signings like this, around the 1 to 2 million, or I don't know, $750,000, to 1.5 million or what have you, in respects of building up the squad with those type of players? Or could you see a more expensive one coming in the, in that 1.5 to 2.5 or even higher category?
I guess it's a risk, isn't it? There's a risk level, because it's not just the transfer fee. The wages are going to be commensurate to the transfer fee. If you sign someone for £1.5 million, then you're probably going to be paying them 10 grand a week. If you sign someone for £3.5 million, you're probably looking at 25 grand a week. So those deals become huge risks, really, don't they, on that side? But it's just, if we want a striker of a similar quality to Leif Davis, Harry Clark, Nathan Broadhead, Jack Taylor now, the fees are going to be bigger, aren't they? And we do need at least one striker. There's probably an argument that we need 2 strikers, and that you could be after both George Hurst and Ellis Sims. And if you do that, the fees are going to be, you're probably going to spend 4 million for the pair of those if you were looking at those, aren't you? And if you're doing that, so I do think this won't be the biggest fee of the summer. I think a striker will be the biggest fee of the summer, unless something sort of has gone wrong and we end up having to go into the loan market at the end of the window.
Yeah, I think one of the strikers possibly will be a loan anyway, won't it, in terms of splitting up that risk, like you say. And we mentioned it on the pod at the weekend, Joe, about a centre-back as well. And, that could be a similar amount of money as well. But
big left-footed centre-back with championship experience, you're going to be a big fee, aren't you?
I did see a very good big centre-back wearing an Ipswich shirt at Glastonbury on Twitter, who's left-footed as well. But I think, maybe we may be a few years away from that. But generally speaking, Joe, I think I really like the deal. I think it shows good ambition. I like the idea of, like you say, hanging on to a target, whatever league you're in, and sticking at it. And I like the profile of the player. So a really good start to the summer window. Would you agree?
Yep. Yeah. Probably a predictable start to the summer window, but yeah, very good
can
start.
Be good.
Landing long-term targets is never a bad thing.
Absolutely not. Guys, let us know what you think if you're watching here on YouTube, down in the comments. Do you agree with me and Joe? Do you think it's a good deal? I think we're happy with it. Let us know if you've got any doubts about it. We always love to hear both sides of the argument. While you're there, do hit like. If you're listening on the podcast feed, you can let us know your thoughts via Twitter, or you could discuss directly with Mr. Joe Fairs. You can get straight to his phone via our Telegram group, Joe.
Yes, the ITFC transfer chat is lit, as the kids would say, this time of year. But no, it's a really good place to maybe have some of the BS filtered out from Twitter. Like, obviously there are still Twitter links and things discussed in there, but generally somebody's taking the actual time to think, is this worth thinking about, and put it in there, as opposed to just having enough thrown at the wall to see if anything sticks. So there's some good chat in there, talking about squad sizes today, all the exciting stuff.
This is what we do in the Telegram chat, but it's a great way of supporting the pod. You can get a 2-week free trial. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can also go to the merch store. And I think we'd all admit I look very fetching, handsome, sharp, whatever you like, in my Blue Monday t-shirt today. Anyway, I'll stop the corporate nonsense. And what we really want is your opinion on the signing of Jack Taylor in from Peterborough to Ipswich. Hopefully not the first name in of the summer, but an exciting, if predictably good, as Joe points out, start. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And hopefully we'll see you all very soon with more arrivals to talk about.